had a really significant relationship of mine that had been ruptured in a really painful way. It was something that shook me to my core and changed pretty much everything about my life. So I knew that I had this trauma stuck in my body, and I was able to surrender the story of the trauma, of the victimization, of the righteous anger that I felt in the wake of that, and instead shift the frame to my capacity to heal, my ability to move through all of that trauma and to excavate it from my body. The quality of our life is defined by what we pay attention to. But this point of reconnection would have been something that potentially would have disrupted my entire life just a few years ago. But because of that quote, because of the reframe that I was able to put around the situation, I clearly got that trauma out of my body. Hello, and welcome to the Art of Lost and Found. I'm your host, Brooke Estin. On today's episode, I wanted to explore this concept of rupture and repair, both in a literal sense as well as a metaphorical sense. Many years ago, I heard this quote that completely changed my life. It's incredibly simple, yet profoundly powerful. And it's that the quality of our life is defined by what we pay attention to. Similarly, our perception shapes our reality. What does this mean? It sounds like very, Instagram quotes, something that you would see on a magnet or a postcard or something like that. But for me, it fundamentally shifted something quite deep inside me. In that particular moment that I came across that quote, I was feeling somewhat out of control of my life. I was feeling like a victim of circumstances, and I felt incredibly disempowered. I took this as an opportunity to essentially reframe the situation. Now, I want to share a few examples, 3 stories in particular that really illustrate this. So last month, my partner and I were living in Amsterdam. He had a project with the University of Amsterdam, and so we went back there. Or better yet, I went back there. I lived in Amsterdam for a couple of years before I moved to Spain. My partner had never been to Amsterdam before. Amsterdam was a place of really character-defining times of my life. The time that I lived in Amsterdam, I was polyamorous, I was a digital nomad, I was running around from one place to another, very ungrounded and incredibly attached to my concept of freedom. I had a lot of really beautiful experiences. I got to connect with loads of different people, and I felt really empowered until I didn't, until I hit the limitations of the life that I had been living. The lifestyle that I had designed for myself was very ungrounded, to say the least. So when I went back to Amsterdam, all these years later, almost 9 years later, and going back with my partner, my fiance, I knew that it was going to be significant for me. Leading up to this return to Amsterdam, I felt a tremendous amount of anxiety and stress. I felt like something was going to shift once I got back there. I had a really significant relationship of mine that had been ruptured in a really painful way. I won't go into details about it because it's not necessary, but it was something that shook me to my core and changed pretty much everything about my life. The way that I saw relationships, the way that I saw myself as a professional, and many, many more aspects of who I thought I was had been shattered. And there was a person in particular where there was a deep rupture, a deep wound. I spent years in therapy, years doing different kinds of rituals, ceremonies, healings, to try to right what I thought was a wrong. And I tried to do that in a way where I would not have any contact with this person. This person felt very unsafe to me. And there was not an opportunity in my mind for repair. Yet I wanted to heal. I wanted to reclaim my power. I wanted to feel free again. So, as you can imagine, 9 years after this incident, going back to Amsterdam, I was full of anxiety. I had this feeling like I was going to run into him or encounter him in some way, and I was going to be unprepared. The last time that happened, that I encountered him, or shall I say, nearly encountered him, I had a very intense physical reaction, which now I understand that to be PTSD. But I had a very strong physical reaction that lasted for 2 days. And it took me about 3 days before I started feeling really normal and grounded again. So I knew that I had this trauma stuck in my body, hence all the therapy and healings and rituals and ceremonies and all of the things that I did to try to excavate that. So going back to Amsterdam, I knew that something was going to shift. But because I had done so much excavating to try to find the values, the gems from this experience, and I was in a stable, loving, supportive relationship, and I am an entrepreneur. I have a 6-figure business, and I don't have somebody telling me what to do. There's no boss that I have to surrender my fate to in a professional capacity. So, as I was reflecting on the anxiety and uncertainty that was coming up for me leading to Amsterdam, I decided that I was going to rewrite this story. I was going to reframe it, relating to what I said at the beginning, this quote of the quality of your life is defined by what you pay attention to. I shifted my attention. I reframed the situation. I sat with myself, I journaled, I meditated, I talked with close, trusted friends, especially friends who had been there and understood the full complexity of the story. And I was able to surrender the story of the trauma, of the victimization, of the righteous anger that I felt in the wake of that, and instead shift the frame to my capacity to heal, my resilience, my ability to move through all of that trauma and to excavate it from my body. With that renewed energy, I went to Amsterdam. And after 9 years of absolutely no contact, this person texted me. I had met up with a mutual friend. This person had come up in conversation, and this mutual friend had shared with him. So he messaged me. And when I received that message, after all the trauma, all the pain, all of the hours and hours and hours of my own reworking of the situation, my stomach did not drop. My heart did not beat faster. I picked up my phone, I looked at the text message, and I said, hey, you. It was this knowing that things were moving, energy was shifting. It was time to leave behind the rupture and to focus on the repair. This person and I have still not had a proper conversation. That's something that perhaps will happen in the future. But this point of reconnection would have been something that potentially would have disrupted my entire life just a few years ago. But because of that quote, because of the reframe that I was able to put around the situation, I clearly got that trauma out of my body. I've had a brief conversation with this person since, just, text message, voice notes. We've set up a call for a future date where we can step into a deeper container to explore what happened and why and how to move forward. Most likely move forward independently rather than having any kind of active relationship. But it was something that really struck me in a way that gave me a sense of power and intentionality around how I experience events that were completely devastating for me previously. So, my point with sharing this story is that even if you aren't able to have a conversation with somebody, even if you aren't able to repair things together, there is so much space for healing independent of the other person. The way that I see this is the conversation with him that likely will happen in the future is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. He could attack me, assault me, verbally assault me. This is going to be a Zoom conversation, so there's definitely physical space that is there. But he could come at me with all of his ammunition, and I don't anticipate being affected. I don't think that I'll be impacted. I feel so grounded in my understanding of what happened and why, and how I was able to grow and evolve and learn and mature because of that experience, that I feel like I can fully claim it as mine. It doesn't need to be a shared experience. I don't need to understand his perspective. I understand mine. And the quality of my life is defined by what I choose to pay attention to. I choose to pay attention to resilience, to showing up and doing the hard work, to excavate the trauma, to reclaim my sense of power and purpose in the world. While we were in Amsterdam, something else happened that illustrates this point in a much less emotionally charged way, but in a way that I think is just a beautiful story. So we have an apartment. We actually have two apartments in Sevilla, in Spain, where I live. And instead of letting both of these apartments, sit empty for the month that we were in Amsterdam, and on top of that, pay extremely high rents, which Amsterdam has now, we decided to do a house exchange. No money exchanges hands, just we stay in your house, you stay in ours. I reached out to my network. I was able to connect with somebody who connected me with a work colleague of theirs. We had a Zoom call to see if we felt comfortable with each other, and we decided to do it. So, without ever having met these people in person, we decided that we were going to do this house exchange. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. I wanted to take a moment to share something that could potentially make a huge difference for you and your creative business in just 30 minutes. We all need a little therapy sometimes. Brand therapy, that is. If you're a freedom seeking creative, coach, or online service provider, and you're looking to grow a profitable business without sacrificing your well being, then I would love to help you. I want to give you a special invite for a free mini brand therapy call. What is brand therapy, you ask? It's like a blend of emotional and physical therapy, but for your business. In this mini session, it's 30 minutes designed to help you gain clarity or cross the finish line with that strategy or task that you've been wrestling with, feeling way too stuck, lost, or overwhelmed to make any significant progress. Some of the things we can discuss in our session include creating or adjusting your website, designing or refining your offerings, creating digital products, tech or system setup, all of those questions and more. If you're ready to get some support in growing your business without sacrificing your well-being, then head over to brookeestin.com/free call. Offer is valid for new clients and only subject to availability. Looking forward to doing some brand therapy together soon. Now, back to the episode. We showed up at their place first. They gave us the keys, and then shortly after, they flew to Spain and stayed in our place. When we got to Amsterdam and saw their place, my partner's first reaction was, we really got the better end of this deal. Their place is so nice. Everything looks brand new. They have this big kitchen. There's a giant island in the kitchen. It's not a, place that clearly could benefit from some renovations, which is our place in Spain. But I felt like the exchange energetically felt really balanced. Yes, we had a newer apartment in Amsterdam, but they ended up with two apartments in Spain. they took full advantage of that and had a friend come and join them for part of their time here, staying in the other apartment. So my partner was already feeling a little bit uneasy, and I felt really grounded in that this was a win-win exchange and nobody got a better deal. It felt balanced to me. One of the things that we noticed in their apartment was this extraordinarily unique vase. It was a glass blown vase that was blown on top of a piece of what looked like driftwood. So it was an incredibly unique piece that fit perfectly on this piece of wood. Inside that vase was a beautiful bonsai tree. It was beautiful. It's one of the signature things that you see inside their apartment. And it was placed right by a window on the windowsill. So we're there. We're there maybe like a week of the month that we're going to be there. We're very early on to the trip. I was in the other room on a work call, and all of a sudden, I heard this huge gust of whistling wind and then the sound of glass breaking. Yeah, it's like the worst, right? When that sinking feeling in your stomach when you know, oh no, this is going to be bad. Let me turn the corner and see what we're dealing with. So I jumped up, I ran into the living room, and as you probably anticipated, on the floor was probably 30 pieces of glass and a bonsai tree on the floor. I threw my hands on my face and went, oh no, this is the worst thing that can break. This is totally irreplaceable. Oh shit, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So I collected the pieces of glass. I put them in a little container. And I picked up the bonsai tree and I put it in a pot, like a cooking pot, the only thing that was big enough to hold it. And I thought, okay, I'll deal with this later. I need to finish my day. Then my partner comes home and I shared with him what had happened. And he was devastated, so devastated that he didn't even sleep for 3 days. Like that in and out of sleep, that's super stressed out, like, oh no, impending doom feeling. So over those couple of days, we started looking at glass blowers in Amsterdam, right? But of course, we wanted to just replace what had been broken. Meanwhile, the story that my partner was telling himself, and later he shared with me, was that this was probably a precious, irreplaceable, hugely sentimental piece of work that they had in their place. The couple was from South Africa, but they were living in Amsterdam. My partner thought perhaps this was like a gift from a dying grandparent on their deathbed saying, just take care of this vase and this bonsai, and that they had brought it all the way from South Africa. He made a very convincing argument for himself that this was just the worst thing that could have possibly happened. I, on the other hand, started thinking creatively, right? It's broken. Like there's nothing we can do. It broke. So, first thing, try to save this tree, which I'm happy to say we were able to do it, the bonsai tree. Second thing, start researching options for replacing it. So, we reached out to, I think we emailed probably 7 or 8 different glass blowers, trying to explain to them what this vase looked like because we didn't really have a picture. And also trying to figure out how much it would cost and whether we could get it done in 3 weeks. We ended up getting one lead that said that they could do it for 600 euros and it would take over a month. So I thought, okay, that's not a viable option. We can pay for it, it would hurt, but the timeline, that's a deal breaker. It won't work. So I started thinking, okay, what can we do? What can make this situation better? And I remembered a video that I had seen on YouTube many, many years ago that brought this Japanese concept to my attention. The concept is called Kintsugi. It is the art of repair. Basically, the idea behind it is that when things break, particularly ceramic, porcelain, uh, even glass, when they break, you oftentimes have all of the pieces, right? It's not like something explodes and it's just into powder or microscopic pieces. You have these pieces. So the philosophy, the way that I understand this philosophy, is that instead of trying to go for perfection and pretend like there was never a rupture, instead, you honor the rupture by repairing it with the type of lacquer that has gold infused in it. So instead of trying to hide the damage, you actually highlight the damage. You bring it back together and you join the pieces together and you see these thick veins of gold. It it means that the piece has more story. It means that it has more character. And it also means that it's more valuable because now it has gold infused in it. It comes from this larger concept of wabi sabi, which is this idea of beauty in imperfection, right? It's not this Western concept of beauty that is very clean and symmetrical and perfect. This is, you know, the beautiful woman who has a slightly crooked tooth and it just makes her that much more beautiful. Or in my case, the larger nose, right? I don't have a little button nose, I have a more prominent nose. My partner finds that to be more attractive than those small little, noses that you see in magazines and models and all of that. It's this concept of wabi sabi, right? That the imperfections, quote unquote imperfections, make something more beautiful because it has more character, more story, and more value. So I started thinking, maybe we can repair this using Kintsugi. How would we do that? I mean, we can find glue, maybe some type of special golden powder or even gold paints. Like, we can try this because what do we have to lose? What do we have to lose except a little bit of time and energy, right? If these people are going to be super upset about the vase, they're going to be super upset about the vase, right? Right now, it's either going to go in the trash or we try to repair it, it doesn't work, and it goes in the trash then, right? So the following week, we end up going to the Rijksmuseum, one of the most famous museums in Amsterdam. And while we were in the gift shop, I spotted a Kintsugi kit, literally a kit that had everything in there, just sitting there right in the middle of the museum for 30 euros. So, of course, we bought it and we repaired it. We spent a lot of time. We made a whole bunch of videos because we ended up stitching together this 5-minute story that we texted them to explain what happened. It had music, it had B-roll, it had time-lapse video, it had the whole kind of story. It had a narration. Like, we really went to town with this video. So we repaired the pieces, we put it back together, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And when we did that, I started noticing they had a lot of Asian art in their apartment. They had a lot of things that had like a gold trim. So this vase actually fit the same style as what they already had. So I thought, okay, I think we did it. My partner was definitely less convinced. And with our hearts beating, we created that video, our hearts pounding even faster and faster. And we sent the video and we said, we're so sorry. If this is something that, does not fit with you, we will absolutely pay for it. If you just tell us how to replace it, we'll make sure that that happens. We're so sorry that this happened while we were here. It was just a freak accident. The window wasn't completely latched. And so when this gust of wind came, it just happened. And we were so sorry. We want to make it right. This was our attempt to make it right. And we shared the video. And shortly after, they responded with the sweetest, most understanding, and excited message. They said that it was even more beautiful. They appreciate it so much. They loved it. We shouldn't have worried about it at all. Everything is good. And they just felt so happy that now they have this face that is more beautiful, more valuable, and has more of a story to it. Talk about a reframe, right? On the other hand, a few days later, we get a text message from them saying that they broke something in our apartment as well. And because we had created this, video for them and we had gone through this, all of the trouble and everything, when they wrote, they said, okay, it's our turn now. And it was something that was so insignificant and I could not care less about. It was like a plastic remote control for a projector that I barely even use and that doesn't require a remote. Like you can just turn it on from the actual projector itself. So talk about a reframe. My partner and I had a long conversation about this, especially because of how much stress he put on himself. He lost sleep for 3 days. He had that pit in his stomach every time he thought about it for weeks. And in reality, going through that experience actually created a stronger relationship, a more meaningful story between us and this couple that we did the house exchange with, right? It was this idea of rupture and repair, of making something even more than it was before. This vase, to them, it seemed relatively neutral. And now it has a story. There's something that gave it more life and significance and meaning. So, the idea behind this is that when we are in an unknown space, we have the opportunity to create stories and frames in our mind. The way that our minds work is that when we are presented with situations that are uncertain, oftentimes we lean on the side of worst case scenario. In the first story that I shared, I felt like I was this victim, that I had been wronged, and that my entire life was partially going to be defined by this experience. I felt angry. I felt righteous. I felt so much negativity in my body, in my physical body, right? In the second story with the Kintsugi method, my partner thought that this was the worst thing that could have possibly happened. But in reality, the first story that I shared led to my ability to heal myself, to be resilient in the face of things, to put it lightly, not going according to plan. In the second story with the Kintsugi method, we ended up creating a stronger relationship with this couple. We are endeared to them. We're part of their story and their history of their place now. This thing that had been a relatively neutral but beautiful piece now has a story. Now it's a talking piece, right? It facilitated more connection, deeper intimacy, and something that bonded us beyond just an exchange of keys. We all have the ability to create stories in our mind. So if we're stepping into an unknown space, the worst case scenario could certainly be possible, but so could the best case scenario. If we don't know and we're just speculating, and worst case scenario causes us pain and stress and loss of sleep and anger and negatively impacts our relationships, and the best case scenario opens space for creativity, possibility, connection, things being even better than we could have anticipated, why do we constantly default to the negative? This stems from the brainstem, the very back part, the reptilian part of our brain that's scanning for threats. It's a lot more useful for us to anticipate danger than to assume everything is going to be great, right? That twig that you hear snap when you're in the forest, you are much better off assuming that that's a predator rather than assuming, oh no, it's probably just a small little rodent that ran by. No, no, no. Our brain was designed to keep us safe. But in modern times, rarely do we have a predator behind us in the forest. Most of the time, we're dealing with psychological situations, relational situations where our physical safety is less at risk. So, knowing that and knowing that our quality of life is shaped, is defined by what we pay attention to, and that our perception shapes our reality, it's worth making an effort to lean in to that creative possibilities, to think about what would be a creative way of reframing this situation. How can I make this, quote unquote bad thing, how can I make it good? In fact, how can I make it better than it was before? In the first story that I shared about the relationship with this person, it was never about him. It was always about the relationship that I had with myself. What I was silent on, what I didn't say no to, and what I created space for the unfolding of a series of unfortunate events where I paid a heavy price for that. But that was me looking at the short run. Now that I'm 9 years out from that experience, I have my own business, a 6-figure business that I'm incredibly proud of. I no longer have a boss. I ended up in the place that I wanted to be, that this person had promised that they would help me get to. And then, of course, pulled out on that promise uh, at a really upsetting time. I made it. I got to Spain and I did it myself. And I'm not dependent on anybody else being here. I didn't need him to give me a visa like I thought that I needed previously. I was able to figure it out on my own. And now I am stronger than I was before. I know and understand things that I didn't before. I grew, I evolved, I leveled up because of that experience. Did I do it immediately or perfectly? Absolutely not. Definitely not. That's part of the journey, right? It's a lot of fumbling, a lot of wrestling with hard truths. But eventually, I was able to take responsibility for myself and my own healing completely independent of him. With the vase, we ended up creating this beautiful, beautiful story that both couples are going to cherish probably for as long as that vase is around. If we have the opportunity, which we all do, the opportunity to create a more favorable, empowering story, I invite you to think about Kintsugi. Every time there is a rupture, think about, how can I repair this? How can I make this better and more meaningful and more strong than it was before? In essence, this also is the baseline for manifesting. It's being able to envision something that could be true, to be able to start with that picture in your mind of how things not only are going to be different, but how things are going to be better. Once you're able to lock in to that vision, it's incredible what can unfold from there. So I invite you to ask yourself, what stories are you telling yourself that are not serving you, that seem to be making life harder and heavier, and that aren't necessary? Instead, I invite you to change your story, to rewrite that narrative, to create a story of resilience, of creative expansion. Not only does it create more space and feels good, it also is the seed that is planted that, if watered and if given sunlight, it can grow into something magnificent. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. It helps us more than you know. I'll leave you with one final question before wrapping up this episode. What is a story that you can tell yourself to give you your sense of power, possibility, and creative expansion? Because things might turn out even better than you can imagine. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, then check out my latest episodes right here. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I would so appreciate if you took a moment to leave me a review. Don't forget to add your favorite takeaway from the episode. See you next time.